everyone, Amanda here. Welcome back to my book nook. So, quick disclaimer before we get into this next book. I don't apparently own all of the Scarpetta books, so we're jumping from book 1 to book 3. With that said, today we're going to be discussing Patricia Cornwell's All That Remains. This is book 3, as I stated, of the Scarpetta series. Come here, Kiki. So, a couple of little things in Kay's life that have changed from book 1, especially since, like I said, I don't have book 2. Luckily, as I stated earlier, these books can be read out of order. You don't have to follow the order of the books. You don't have to read them all. They don't fully build on each other. We're not to that point yet. But, so what has changed? Kay's no longer dating Mr. Attorney Billy Boltz from the first book. And she's kind of talking again now, thinking about getting back on with her on-off boyfriend, Mark James. He used to work at the FBI with Benton, quit when he broke up with, left Quantico, went out to Colorado, broke up with Kay when that all happened. But is apparently wanting to get back into the FBI and move back to Quantico, which is kind of why they're talking on, and Kay and him never really are over each other whenever they're not together. It's also been about 6 years because she talks about the fact that Lucy is now a sophomore. And when we first met Lucy, she was 10. Her and Pete went from just a working relationship to they actually have a friendship. Her and Benton also have a friendship, as does Pete and Benton, which made even more sense because they worked in VICAP together. And like they'll go over to Benton's house to have dinner with his wife and kids at times. Abby, the reporter from book 1, following all that, she and Kay also developed a friendship. At the beginning of this book, Kay's called out to a missing car. The reason why she's been called out to this missing car is because this is the 4th car, I believe, might have been the 5th, that has been found, and every other time she's been called out when the body's been found. And it told the cops, hey, next time we find one of these cars, call me out before we find the bodies. Because it's the primary scene and there might be evidence that the ME can use to try to figure out what might have happened. What's been happening is these couples will be abducted from their cars, the car will be found, and a period of time later the bodies will be found in various states of decomposition, mostly skeletonized by that point because it's multiple months, between 6 months to a year and a half in most cases. To the point that the ME is not able to determine cause of death anymore. Hence, so with the title, All That Remains, because all we have left are the bare remains. What is a secondary problem for this missing couple is the woman of the couple is the daughter of, in this world's current drug czar. So there's a concern that it might not potentially be part of the serial abduction / murders, and it could just be someone targeting her. So they're investigating this missing couple, and they do eventually find them, and luckily with this one they find them relatively early comparatively, to the point that they're able to determine that while the man was shot, the woman was both shot and stabbed. She had defensive wounds. And they also realize that there's an interesting thing about where these bodies are being found. They're being found in commonly used hunting areas that typically don't get a lot, if any, foot traffic outside of hunting season, which they realize makes sense for when cars are being found and when bodies are being found. That a car will be found and then turkey season will happen, the bodies will be found. The car will be found and then the next year's deer season will happen. So it's helping have the bodies decompose to a point in which there's not a lot of forensic evidence present. In addition, while this is going on, Kay also receives a really worrying call from Abby. Abby is concerned and scared because she was driving home one day and accidentally made a wrong turn, wasn't paying attention to where she was going, and ended up almost driving onto Camp Perry. And since then, she's been realizing that there are cars following her, that she'll hear a clicking noise on her phone if she's talking to people, and she's worried that the FBI and CIA are stalking her because of her almost getting on Camp Perry, and because she's a reporter. So Kay's trying to help her also figure this out on her own because, hey, this is a friend of hers. And Benton and Mark are both warning her off of Abby and telling her to stop looking into this. And Abby is also investigating these other cases and everything, and is giving information to the mother, who happens to be the drug czar. We later find what turns out to be our serial killer's first victims that no one made a connection to. Partly because it was the first one, so there were some differences there. But the biggest thing is that for the longest time, everyone assumed that the two people in the car who were killed, were friends, because it was a lesbian couple, and both of them were kind of hiding it, because the one was in law school and working to be a lawyer, and this would have been really bad for her if it had come out that she was gay. What's very helpful for this one is inside the car there is blood that does not belong to either of the women, and they realize that this is likely the blood of the person who has been doing these murders. So like how I talked about the really fun little science, health-related thing with the maple syrup urine disease from the first book, this one has one also. And that is when they do find the person who was doing the killings and they take his blood, the blood type does not match, but they don't understand because everything else that they know works out for this person. So they have to release him because the forensic evidence that they have with the blood types doesn't line up. Minor little spoilery part here in order to get back into the whole neat science aspect. Abby and Pat, who's the drug czar, go to confront him. He kills Abby, Pat kills him, and when they are able to use more than just blood to run a comparison, and they have more DNA aspects that they can look at, it turns out it was the killer. So what is the neat science here? So he killed the first couple and then was diagnosed with aplastic anemia, and he disappeared for those 5 years because he was doing treatment for it. Part of that treatment included a bone marrow transplant. Now, an interesting thing that can happen with bone marrow transplants is your blood type is not the same as it was before you got the bone marrow transplant, and it now matches the donor. So when they did his blood had changed its blood type, and it did not line up. So it wasn't until they had more DNA evidence that they were able to use and compare it to that they realized, oh, this was the guy. So with the first book, I know I gave it, I believe, an 8 out of 10. This one I'm going to give a 7.5 out of. I wasn't as pulled into it as I was with the first book, so it took me a little longer to read. I wasn't as excited about reading it as much as I was with the first one, so I made it a little bit lower. I still recommend it. I still think it's enjoyable. The science with the plastic anemia is really cool. I think part of my issue with it, honestly, was the whole thing with Abby and Camp Perry and the FBI CIA thing. I think had that part not been in the book and it was just focusing on the crime, I would have liked it better. One thing I did like a lot in this book that they didn't have with the first one was it gave a little bit more reality to the ME experience. In the first one, the only thing that Kay was dealing with was that case. In this one, there's a couple of times in which they talk about the fact that she has other things that she's working on, such as a kid that had drowned, or having like 7 bodies that she has to process because the shoot and stab club was really busy the night before. So it actually was making it clear that an ME doesn't just work on the one case. They're going to be doing autopsies for multiple different people at a time. And so I really liked that more reality aspect of it. So thanks again for watching. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss things, and I will see you next time. Bye everyone.